At least 10 people have died in a bombing at a Kabul mosque, with the death toll expected to rise. As yet, no one has claimed responsibility for the blast. UN Chief Antonio Guterres arrives in Ukraine for talks with President Zelensky and Turkish President Erdogan about securing the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant and ending the conflict with Russia. And the leaders of Kosovo and Serbia are meeting in Brussels for EU-mediated talks aimed at avoiding renewed conflict between the two countries. At least 10 people, including a prominent cleric, have died in a bombing during evening prayers at a mosque in Kabul. The exact number of casualties is unclear, but with at least 27 people wounded, including several children, the number of deaths is likely to rise. There was no immediate claim of responsibility for the bombing, which is the latest in Afghanistan over the past year since the Taliban seized power. The so-called Islamic State group's local affiliate has stepped up attacks targeting the Taliban and civilians following the withdrawal last year of US and NATO troops.
Emergency workers searched through the rubble of a dormitory building for survivors after Russian shelling of a residential district in the city of Kharkiv. According to Ukrainian officials, at least 7 people were killed in the strike. President Zelensky called it a cynical attack on civilians. Zelensky in his nightly address focused on diplomatic indicators he said reflected the resilience of the Ukraine state, from the arrival of UN Chief Antonio Guterres and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan for talks on the situation at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, to 55 ambassadorial missions resuming their work in Kyiv. On the grain crisis front, 4 more vessels carrying agricultural products have sailed from ports in Ukraine. Turkish state media said the ships departed Odessa and Chernozemsk on Wednesday, carrying sunflower meal, sunflower oil and corn. They're the latest vessels to leave Ukraine under the terms of a grain export deal agreed between the UN, Ukraine, Turkey and Russia last month. Elsewhere, and footage released by Russian media shows that residential construction by the Russian military is in full swing in one of the most heavily bombed areas of the occupied city of Mariupol.
Ukraine's state emergency service has been drilling first aid exercises in the case of a nuclear accident. That's as concerns surrounding Zaporizhzhia's power plant grow. Ukrainian technicians have stayed at the Russian-held nuclear power plants despite pressure from Russian soldiers to make sure that the Chernobyl-style disaster isn't repeated.
Of course, we understand that we're dealing with a terrorist state, so we must understand that all responsibility for what is currently happening at the station and for any scenarios that are unfolding lies with the Russian Federation, and we have to prepare for any possible scenarios in connection with this.
Russia and Ukraine accuse each other of shelling the Zaporizhzhia plant, the largest of its kind in Europe. International leaders, including NATO's Secretary-General, have called for inspections of the site. It's expected to top the agenda of talks on Thursday with the UN, Ukraine and Turkey.
The seizure of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant by Russian forces poses a serious threat to the safety and the security of this facility, raises the risks of a nuclear accident or incident, and endangers the population of Ukraine, of neighbouring countries and of the international community.
In Nikopol, residents feel the brutality of war. They're just a couple of kilometres away from the plant and fear finding themselves at the heart of a nuclear disaster.
I was there, but my son managed to drag me out just in time. But he didn't have time for my husband. My husband was buried under the rubble. The rocket landed right where he was laying in bed. His legs were torn off.
In Odessa, 3 people were injured after Russian shells hit a recreation centre. And in Donetsk, 2 were killed and 7 injured after towns and villages were shelled. Meanwhile, Ukraine claims it hit a Russian base in occupied Nova Kakhovka. killing 12 soldiers and putting pressure on the Kremlin's fighters in the south.
NATO Secretary Jens Stoltenberg met with leaders of Serbia and Kosovo in Brussels ahead of high-level crisis talks on Thursday. EU mediators hope the meeting will de-escalate growing tensions in the Balkans, where Russia has tried to increase its influence amid the war in Ukraine. Stoltenberg says NATO has bolstered its military presence in Kosovo.
While the situation on the ground has improved, it is the responsibility of all parties, particularly the officials from Belgrade and Pristina, to prevent escalation again. I call on all sides to show restraint and to avoid violence. Should stability be jeopardized, KFOR stands ready to intervene and will take any measures that is necessary to ensure a safe and secure environment and freedom of movement for all the people of Kosovo.
Don't expect Serbs to lay back and say that they feel good. There is a new generation of kids, young men in North Kosovo and Kosovo in general, who won't stand for it. They don't see Kosovo as an independent country, like 22 of 27 EU member countries do. They see it as Serbia's territory.
It is an opportunity for Kosovo to is central to its mission.
Then on one side you have democratic state of Kosovo, we have professional police of our republic, and on the other hand, on the other side you have illegal structures of Serbia who have been turned into criminal gangs, who erected barricades. And in this sense, you can say that there are two sides, but we should never lose moral center.
There are fears in the West that Russia could use its Serbian ally to destabilize the Balkans and shift attention from its war in Ukraine. Serbia, Russia and China don't recognize Kosovo's independence, which is supported by the United States and most other Western countries.
Britain braces for 3 days of strike action across the rail, tube and bus networks. Once again, tens of thousands of workers are demanding better pay and work conditions. This comes as inflation soars to a 40-year high after the Consumer Price Index surged to 10.1% last month. But the Bank of England warns there's worse to come, predicting a peak of just over 13% this year. Meanwhile, the National Statistics Office says wages, excluding bonuses, have dropped a record rate of 3%. This adds to the UK's cost of living crisis as the threat of recession looms.
Monkeypox continues to spread across the globe, with cases jumping by 20% over the last week. The World Health Organization says nearly all the infections are being reported from Europe and the Americas.
More than 35,000 cases of monkeypox have now been reported to WHO from 92 countries and territories, with 12 deaths. Almost 7,500 cases were reported last week, a 20% increase over the previous week, which was also 20% more than the week before.
The WHO chief said there's been a total of 12 monkeypox-related deaths outside of Africa where the virus is normally found. Although most of the cases being reported are among men having sex with other men, the virus can be caught via intimate contact between any infected individuals. Health officials say, due to lack of data, vaccines should not as yet be seen as a silver bullet for controlling the outbreak. They are still stressing the importance of individuals taking other precautions, such as reducing their number of sexual partners and avoiding group or casual sex.
Japan has found itself in the middle of a bribery scandal over the Tokyo 2020 Olympics following the arrest of a former committee board member, along with 3 employees of a clothing company that sponsored the Games. Haruyuki Takahashi, a former executive at advertising company Dentsu, is suspected of receiving bribes from the former head of Aoki Holdings and 2 company employees. Aoki, which makes affordable business suits, was considered a surprise choice to dress the Japanese Olympic team, while other nations opted for more internationally recognisable brands. The alleged bribery, totalling around €370,000, is thought to be linked to sponsorship of the Games and products related to the Olympics. Japanese media reports said that Takahashi denies any wrongdoing. But nonetheless, the controversy deals a significant blow to Japan's ambitions to host the 2030 Winter Olympics in Sapporo.